I wanted to read about vampires this week. I think they are, especially vampires in literature, are so rich with themes that you can explore. There's just so much under the surface. No matter what genre, I try to pick from very different genres. We have a modern classic, we have a contemporary romance / urban fantasy, we have a neo-noir, books that are as different as I can get them with the common theme of vampires. So lately, I don't know if it's because it was just Halloween that passed, but there has been a little bit of a resurgence when it comes to vampires, and I'm intrigued. It's always interesting to see them resurface. It is a topic tackled by so many different authors to explore so many different allegories. Is it allegories? Yeah, let's just go with allegories. Whether it is powerlessness, belonging, mortality, not fitting into the standards of society. The flexibility in subject matter and the rich history makes vampires one of the most intriguing topics to delve in as a writer and as a reader. Alright, we're going to start with a modern classic. You cannot talk about vampires without referencing this series. It is Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. I was meant to read this book for my degree, but I did not do the reading that week because I was too busy doing improv comedy. Even though I'm sad I didn't read it a few years ago, I'm glad I'm getting to it now in a manner that's not rushed. It follows a man recently turned into a vampire called Louis, recounting his years with Lestat and later on Claudia, giving a man he has just met an interview. That is the premise, that's sort of the framework of the whole book. I'm always a big fan of stories that are framed by other people telling the stories. It's a technique that's used a lot in classical literature. I think it worked perfectly for this, hence the title, Interview with the Vampire. It opens up a lot of doors to unreliable narrators, of course, but I think that makes it a lot more interesting. One quote that really stood out encapsulates the first book of the series: "Evil is always possible and goodness is eternally difficult." What's always drawn me to vampires is the moral dilemma. If they are made from evil, are they capable of good, and how hard is it to be good? That good versus evil struggle is very evident in this book. One of the main themes, as well as self-exploration. There is an abundance of religious themes as well. Going into this book, I expected the majority of it to be vampires dealing with their existence and their morality, but of course it was so much more than that. These characters really came alive. So many themes explored of morals, humanity, relationships. Writing was so beautiful, the pacing was so well done. Really built this eerie, isolating atmosphere quite well. Louis as a narrator worked so well. Such a compelling character. Because Louis is telling the story in past tense, there's this huge sense of foreboding. You definitely see why it's a popular series that's still referenced today. All around a great book. I'm sure you've heard it from other people before. I just want to dive into the second book, which is The Vampire Lestat. Right away, there are like so many books in the series. I've tried to not read about them just because I don't want to be spoiled. There's so much to explore with this series, and yeah, I'm very excited to read more of it. Soon as I finished the first book, you know I had to start the TV show. Dare I say, it made the experience of reading the book so much better. People in front of and behind the camera really understood the story, really understood the characters, brought them to life and to this modern era in the best way possible, especially the casting and also aging up Claudia. So choosing to change Louis' occupation added to that theme of morality and self-acceptance. The acting was phenomenal. Chemistry was insane. Not gonna spoil anything, but this happens in the first 5 minutes. We're introduced to Daniel as he's presenting a masterclass, I think. At first I thought it was a masterclass, and using the context of the modern era and a post-2020 pandemic to give Louis that motivation to sit down and talk with Daniel again years later. The show did such a great job. Everything you'd want from an adaptation. You can easily get into it if you've read the book or if you haven't read the book. I just saw the trailer for season 2 as well. Cannot wait till that comes out next year, I think. After that, I wanted something less heavy to read, which is why I picked up a contemporary romance. It's one of my favorite genres, but this time it has a little twist. My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This book cover, this art style caught my eye in a bookshop, and I could not wait to read it. I thought it'd be perfect for this week. We follow Cassie Greenberg, who is struggling a little bit in this economy. She's about to be evicted, so she's in a really dire position until she finds an ad on Craigslist looking for a roommate, $200 a month, I believe. She goes to meet him. Her initial thoughts is kind of a Mr. Darcy-esque sort of person, dresses a bit outside of this era, which is first clue there. She works various different jobs. She's a multimedia artist wanting to get her name out there. Work involves painting in the traditional sense of paintbrush and oils or acrylics, also combining that with the mixed media, and she mainly uses garbage or other materials from the modern world. So combining those two eras ties into the book so well. He's basically a vampire looking for someone to introduce him to the modern era. And he decides that she's perfect for that. And that's where our story starts. Very fun, lighthearted read. I think I just found my favorite genre, which is contemporary romance meets urban fantasy. I mean, that is a genius genre and we should explore it more. We need more contemporary vampires. An element that the author added that I particularly loved, it's all told in Cassie's POV, but before each chapter you get these little tidbits of Frederick, who is the vampire. That was a nice little insight, a nice little peek, because we already know the big reveal and we're just waiting for Cassie to also figure it out. And the characterization of Frederick was also very funny. He's very formal and not from this time, which is of course what you'd assume. Such an endearing read. I loved both their characters. They were so lovely to read about. Humor was very much my sense of humor. I mean, they meet for the first time after her shift at a library working with kids. So she's wearing a Sesame Street top. We all know the Count is top 5 best vampires of all time. You know what? Number 1 vampire of all time is the Count from Sesame Street. The second half of the book was also not what I expected at all, so it was very fun joining them along for the ride. Reginald is a menace. I think Reginald is like his Renfield, but he's also a vampire. His vampire friend who's also his enemy that pranks him a lot. It's modern, but it invokes these timeless themes. Really great romance at the heart of the book. I love romances where it's all about self-improvement, because that's what love is. It makes you a better human being / and or vampire. Yeah. Sometimes you just want a roommate that's a really hot, moral vampire that might be going through a existential crisis, but not a moral crisis. Sometimes you just want to read about different sorts of vampires. It made me giggle, had a little bit of spice as well if you're interested in that. If you're looking for a sweet romance to read with a little fantasy element of having the male lead be a vampire, this is a perfect book. After that, again, went for a completely different genre. I decided on Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno-garcia. I saw this on so many recommendations list of best vampire books. I had to read that because I had Mexican Gothic on my TBR for a couple of years now, since thanks to Book Talk. There is multiple POVs. We have Domingo Atul, who's our lead, another Renfield, and a police officer, again going on with that noir theme. It's set in a alternate Mexico City, in a world where the existence of vampires is common knowledge and they have to deal with the consequences of that. Follow our protagonist, who is looking to escape while also being chased in a place where it's illegal to be a vampire and she doesn't know who to trust. High tension from the get-go. Reading this book felt like watching an action movie. I'm really glad I picked this one up. So shout out to people making recommendations lists. Thank you. The lore in particular was so interesting because it's not vampires as you'd know them. They mention how vampires in the media differ from vampires in real life. The vampire history traces back to Aztecs, different vampire lineages and subspecies. For example, we have Atul, who is a subspecies that turns into bird-like creatures when they feed. There's beaks, hair turns into feathers, fingers turn into talons, something I haven't seen before in vampire lore. Of course, we have vampires turning into bats, but this was very different and a unique way to explore what a vampire really is. Then we have another species who look more like what you'd expect a vampire to look if you love old movies, particularly Nosferatu. That's how I imagined him. We have a new subspecies enter the mind of anyone who they give their blood to. And because it's a noir, there is a lot of crime elements, there's a lot of action. It's paced perfectly with the action. You have time to world build and really explore this interesting world that she's created, as well as having those scenes of action and high tension where you don't know what's going to happen next. I think she's built out this very well thought out alternate reality that was so exciting to read. Although it is very different from other vampire books, it adds so much uniqueness to the idea of a vampire. The characterization was done well, which is sometimes hard to do when you have different POV point of view characters. She did a great job distinguishing between the voice and really building out those characters and other characters in this world. I definitely want to read more from this author. So yeah, that was my reading week, if it wasn't evident already. I love how vast these depictions are. The last two books in particular really did so well with the world building by referencing other vampires in the canon. You get to see straight away differences and the similarities between these different vampires. It's so cool that we live in a time where there is a universal language. I love, what is it? Intertextuality. It builds the world so well. I highly recommend all these books that I read here, depending on what your taste is or what you're looking for to read, because I had so much fun exploring the vampire literary canon. I want to continue that and make a part 2. So if you know any vampire books that I haven't mentioned or haven't read, or just aren't as well known in pop culture, please comment them below. I'd love to read them. I'd love to check them out. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, see you on the flip page.